For more, let's bring in retired Navy captain and Heritage Foundation senior research fellow Brent Sadler and Foundation for Defense of Democracy's founder Cliff May. Gentlemen, welcome. So from the Washington Post, video shows second strike hit before survivors could flip boat. Lawmakers say, quote, Senator Jack Reed from Rhode Island, the top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee, called on the Pentagon to publicly release the full video and said he was deeply disturbed by what he witnessed. In a statement, he urged Republican colleagues to press on with the inquiry and said the meetings with Bradley must be the only beginning of our investigation into this incident. Brent, what is your assessment?
It certainly kind of feels like an attempt to turn this into a propaganda kind of play by releasing all these videos, when the real question, and I think where Congress had a real strong point, an oversight, was to assure that they understood the legality of these attacks and what the administration's strategy and plan was. They got that, and the legal questions evaporated through the course of last week. I think we need to focus more on how can we continue more effective operations that put the cartels out of business.
I want to play some of the back and forth between the top Democrat on House Intelligence and the Senate Intelligence Chairman, and I'll get you to react.
What I saw in that room was one of the most troubling things I've seen in my time in public service. You have two individuals in clear distress, without any means of locomotion, with a destroyed vessel, who were killed by the United States.
I didn't see anything disturbing about it. What's disturbing to me is that millions of Americans have died from drugs being run to America by these cartels.
What do you make of that back and forth, Cliff?
Well, politically, I think the Democrats are making a mistake in that it appears they're defending the rights of drug smugglers out there. The president, I think, understands that we've had what we call a war on drugs for years, and we have not been fighting it effectively. And he's fighting it in as a war militarily. I also want to say this. I think there's, and Brett and I were talking about this off camera, I think there's something bigger going on here. For a long time, the United States, under various presidents, has been ignoring what's happening in Latin America. We have essentially one good ally there, that's Argentina under Javier Milei, and the president has helped them. We have three real adversaries, real enemies, Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua. We have the Chinese coming in. We have the cartels making common cause with various terrorist groups. He wants to turn his attention to this. And you see this in the national security strategy, where he's not going to let, I think, Latin America fall into the hands of our enemies.
Okay. To Russia and Ukraine, here is President Trump.
And we're making peace all over the world. We're settling wars at levels that nobody's ever seen before. 8 of them. We're looking for one more. That's Russia, Ukraine, if that's possible. And I think we'll get there eventually. Last week, 8,000 soldiers killed. Last month, they had 27,000 soldiers needlessly killed. We got to get that stopped. We're working very hard on it.
Brent, what's your latest assessment on that conflict and the search for peace?
Well, I do think we're in a much more favorable position to actually get the Russians compelled to actually honestly enter into a ceasefire that's meaningful and sustainable. However, there's still a lot of fight left in the Russian side, and that despite the bluster, the Russian people's support for this is also starting to ebb, and also their physical ability to keep this up. But that's not going to slow down in the near term, because they're going to want to try and make as compelling a case for the maximalist territorial advances and in the forthcoming negotiations. So where the fighting stops, when it does, inevitably it will stop. And then the negotiations will pick up. But it had to play out this long.
Peace talks continue, but the Russians continue pounding Ukraine. What about that?
That's because Vladimir Putin does not want peace. He wants victory. He wants to conquer Ukraine. He wants to drag Ukraine back into the empire, back under the rule of the Kremlin, back under his rule as the neo-czar of Russia. That's how he sees that. He sees this as his mission, is to restore the Russian Empire, which for a while was the Soviet Empire. And as the Soviet Empire was bigger than ever. This is his idea of making Russia great again. He has Belarus as a vassal state. He's taken territories off of the neighboring Georgia. He invaded Crimea and annexed it in 2014. No American president has stood up to him. He wants to conquer Ukraine and then move on to conquer other parts of the Russian Soviet Empire. And he wants to humiliate Zelensky. I got to tell you this. He wants to humiliate President Trump, too.
We will follow it all. Cliff May, Brent Sadler, gentlemen, thanks very much.